Welcome everybody to this visual effects tutorial using Hitfilm. I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield and the Kalidasia universe. What I'm doing here today is taking some of my renders from Blender, which is a 3D animation program, piping them into a software called Hitfilm, which is a video editor, visual effects, post-processing software. And I'm going to be using that to apply some additional visual effects to the scene that I don't know how to do inside Blender. Now in this case, I'm working with a scene from the upcoming trailer for the upcoming release for an expansion from my space combat miniatures game, Legends of Kalidasia. I'm going to be applying some kind of charged up lightning effects to Triune heavy destroyer antimatter disruptors. So with that out of the way, let's just dive right into Hitfilm and get this process started. Hitfilm is loaded up and I've got a new composite shot here with 4 renders out from Blender ready to go. The first one, of course, is just going to be the main animation for this scene. What you'll notice here is that the animation is actually a little bit larger than the composite shot. The composite shot is HD 1920 by 1080, but the animations, I rendered those out at 2304 by 1296. This is going to become important later on when we start applying the camera shake effect, but we will worry about that a little bit later. And the next 3 here, these are all tracking points. So within Blender, I attached some little glowing spheres to important points on the ships, and I'm going to, in a moment here, use the Hitfilm tracker to track these points, which is going to allow me to add visual effects elements to the shot. So the first one I just turned on here, I call these the charge ports on the antimatter disruptors for the Triune heavy destroyers. The next one here, these are actually going to be bolts. So in a moment here, when I run the animation, these guys will extend out from the barrel to represent the tips of the bolts that are being charged up. And then the last one just sit fixed attached to the barrels of the disruptors. So let me run through the animation with all these tracking points turned on. And so there you go, you can kind of see how all of them work. Now in order to make them do anything useful inside Hitfilm, I have to track each of them and turn them into point layers. The reason why I rendered these tracking points out as 3 separate animations instead of just one is, well, on various occasions the tracking points overlap with each other, and therefore if they were overlapping with each other I couldn't get a clean track on them. But this way I can get a clean track because they're on different layers and I can track, each layer independently from the others. So now let's go through each of the tracks and then add a tracking object here for each of the 4 points and track them inside Hitfilm for as long as it is possible. Now in this case, the tracking points don't need to be around for the entire animation, so the fact that it kind of craps out a little bit close to the end, that's not a big deal at all. So as I'm speeding through this little workflow piece right here, I want to say this is a bit of an experiment video for my channel, so if you like these kind of things, go ahead and hit that like button and of course share them with other people. Oh yeah, and also subscribe too, that's helpful as well. And now back to the tutorial. Let me scroll through my 3 different tracking point layers, and you can see that I've got 4 tracks on each, and they all roughly trace out the little orange points that they're supposed to. Now in order to do something useful with these inside of Hitfilm, I have to create point layers and then assign a point layer to each one of these tracks. So let's create 12 new point layers, and then I'm going to name them the same thing of each of these different tracking points, and then using the Step 2, apply a layer section for each of those tracking points. I'm going to apply the tracking points transformation to that point layer. So I've created the 12 point layers, and as I run through the animation a few times, you're going to see these point layers more or less track the points they're supposed to. Just going to kind of do a random sample here. So now it's time to create some of the cool charging effects of the antimatter disruptors. And for that, I'm going to be using the lightning effect here inside of Hitfilm. So I'm going to create some new blank layers. I'm going to create some new solid planes. And those are the things I'm going to actually apply the lightning to. In this case, I'm going to have several different layers for the lightning effects. Let me start by creating a new plane. We want to give it a solid background color of black. Let's call this this is Dryden 1 Starboard. For any kind of lighting effect, you want to change the layer properties under controls, change the blend mode to add, and I'm going to go over to the effects tab. We're going to bring in a lightning weapon. They call it lightning weapon, but it's really a lightning and electricity simulator. And let's drag that onto this plane. The first step here is to create the lightning that jumps from the charging port on the antimatter disruptor to the main antimatter disruptor itself. Okay, so inside the lightning effects down here, what we can do is we want to open up the Start tab, change its start point to 0, 0, and then for Use Layer, let's change that to the layer we want to have it for, which is going to be charge D101. Its endpoint, something similar. We're going to set the endpoint to 0, 0, followed by the Use Layer to the layer of the endpoint, which is going to be gun D101. So right now it's got just a very short little electrical effect jumping between those 2 points. It's, well, a little not very impressive. So let's just make this thing bigger. I want to change the width. So let me change the width to, like, I don't know, let's try some different values here. 1.5 at the start point and 1.5 at the end point, and that's going to make it be a little bit larger. Now it's got a little bit more of a larger, more noticeable bolt effect going on. But right now it's probably still a little too twitchy for my likings. So let's start changing some other parameters here. I'm just going to turn down some of the twitch values a little bit. And I also want to change the color to make it glow a little bit closer to the weapon color of the Dryden, so more of a softer, brighter blue color. And then for, let's see here, I need to find the branches. Let's turn down the number of branches to like 2. So it's not quite as an electric bolt, it's more like a plasma jumping thing, because sure, why not, right? And the last thing I need to do is, because the ship is flying towards the camera, I need to animate the width values and then make them grow larger as the ship approaches the camera. So let's try a width of, like, can I go up to 10? No, 5 I think is as big as it's going to let you go. Yeah, 5 is as big as it'll let you go. That's fine. So now, as the ship flies towards the camera, this electrical bolt gets a little bit larger because, like I said, it should be moving towards the camera. Okay, the next effect I need to apply is something very similar, but it represents the actual bolt itself kind of charging up into existence. So let me rename this one to Charge. Now I'm going to duplicate this, and we're going to rename this one to Bolt. With its start and end points, I'm going to change those to the proper points. So the start point is going to become Gun D101, and the end point is going to become Bolt D101. There we go. So then as I animate this, you'll see that it starts growing outwards. And I'm going to just change some of the width properties a little bit. So let me start the width off at like 2.5, so it's a little bit larger. And let me see, where does it reach its maximum size? It reaches its maximum size right here, where the actual Blender animation bolt appears. Should actually be that frame. So I'm going to actually make a jump all the way to size 5 right here. And let's just change up some values and have fun here. There we go. Let's do something kind of like that. So it's charging up the main bolt. And then once the actual Blender animation bolt has appeared, uh-oh, what did I just do? I don't know. Once the main Blender animation bolt has appeared, I want to fade out these effects. So for that, that's kind of easy. I can just go here to the Transform tab for the entire plane, and we can start animating its opacity. So at this point here, we'll have it reach full opacity, And then over, I don't know, let's do about 5 frames. We'll have it animate down to nothing. So basically it'll turn itself off after 5 frames. So let me animate this thing and see how it looks. There we go, that's kind of what I'm thinking. And fairly easily then I can duplicate the entire plane. I can change the start and end values, and I'll create the port side weapon fire. So let me run through the animation quickly. You can see now I've just duplicated the charging bolt for the port side disruptor. The next thing I want to add are some lens flares to kind of sell the fact that there's more charging of the weapons going on. So I'm going to create one more new plane. Once again, it's going to be solid black. Let's call these just charge flares. Change its layer properties blend mode to add. And this time I'm going to drop in the light flares effect. And of course that's not what I want, but it's the default options. Let's play with some things. Change the flare type to whatever you like. For these weapons, I tend to like the LED. Was it flashlight LED? No, not flashlight LED. I actually used a flashlight beam, random curious. This is actually, I use this for the Airghoul fire cannons. You'll see that if you look at the, here's the Airghoul trailer. But for these weapons, I like to use, well, I can't, not, oh dear goodness, no. I just used it last night. Why am my brain failing on me? I just did that one 2 minutes ago, didn't I? There we go. Flashlight white. I like to use this. So, actually don't do that. Now, just like with the lightning effects, we want to, for the hotspot position, choose the center to 0, 0, and then apply a layer, which in this case will start with charge D101, and that's obviously way too bright right there. So let me turn this thing down a little bit. So let's put the intensity down quite a bit. That's probably way too much. There we go. Let's put the size down to like 200. These are basically the lights that sit on the charging weapon, so you can kind of toggle that on off and see what it does. And then let me change the color so that it better matches kind of the blue of the Coast Guard weapons. Here we go. And now let me see here. We need to, I'm actually going to animate the intensity and scale a little bit. So let's see, we need to make it reach peak intensity right when it's supposed to. So let's see, right there. So let's change this to like 0.65 intensity and maybe 250. So just a little bit of a change, not a whole lot. And let's name this guy. So this is the charge on the starboard. I'm going to duplicate this one and apply the same effects to the port charge system. Added the lens flare for the port side weapon charger. Now let's add a lens flare for each of the actual main weapons. So I'm just going to use the same effect. Let me just duplicate it again. Let's rename it to gun starboard. Change our starting point and play with the intensity a little bit. And I want these to be larger and a little bit more intense kind of right off the bat. And what I think I will do, let me go here. So right before it reaches maximum intensity, I'm gonna actually animate this thing to be a little bit bigger and a little bit brighter. So we're just going, okay, so 350. So let's do about 400. And then just make it violently flash. So let's go to 1.5 and like 600. So as soon as it fires, it just has this massive, really bright flash. And what I need to do is actually make all these fade away pretty quickly after the firing. So let me start here. Whoops. Let me start here with the one I've been working on. Let's go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 frames over and just reduce the intensity and the scale down to 0. So pretty much make them disappear really quickly after the weapon actually fires. And I need to add those to the other 2 flashes I've already added. Let's take our gun muzzle flash here, and then we're going to duplicate it. Let's rename it to port. And then we're going to move it over to the other point that it needs to be. So I'm going to move it to the other gun. So there we go. So now, to animate this thing, we have just a terrible violent flash effect that goes on right before it fires. And there you go, it fires the weapon. Okay, what I want to do at this point is actually export the animation, and let's just see how it looks before I move it over to the other ship in case I want to make any changes. But what I need to do is go ahead and just hide all of our tracking points there, because those do not need to be visible. Alright, so I liked how that looked. It's time to move these weapons effects over to the other disruptor. I know I mentioned back at the start I can have 3 planes. It's a lot easier just to duplicate these 2 planes and then just change the start and end points and change some size values, so let's do that. I've moved over the lightning effects for the second Triune, but there is a bit of a problem. This Triune fires its weapons at a different time than the first one, so I've got to adjust the timing of these effects to line up with it firing its guns. And it's actually fairly easy to address this issue. All I have to do is I have to move the 2 planes over to the right in the timeline a little bit, and then that's going to push all the keyframes over, and they're now going to line up better with the animation. Of course, at this point they're still a little coarse. You see they kind of just jump in, so I do need to add a little bit of fading in to handle that situation. There we go. Now the other thing I have to move over are the lens flares. So once again, I'm just going to copy this particular layer for the charge flares here, and let me just actually rename this to charge flares DO1. And let's duplicate this, and I'm going to call this one charge flares DO2. Just change the starting points around, change some sizing so they apply to the other Triune Heavy Destroyer right over here. So the visual effects are now applied. The weapon fire is looking pretty cool. There's a few things left I need to do to finish up the scene though. First, I want to apply some sort of kind of color adjustment layers to the animation of the Triunes, because I tend to render them out relatively low contrast. So we're going to have some fun here. Go back to our original animation layer. And let's see what I want to do this time around. Let's go contrast. It's still contrast, right? So let's go to brightness and contrast. And what I tend to do with Kalidasia things is I crank up the contrast a bit. It intentionally makes things a bit more harsh. So there you go. So now if I go ahead and turn that on off, you can see there's definitely a lot more of contrast. So sometimes, you know, with like the ground combat things, I have desaturated the trailer, but I don't think I'm going to do that too much. The next thing you need to do is add a bit of a camera shake to this whole scene. So for that, I'm going to go add a grade layer. A grade layer is something that basically affects everything below it in Hitfilm. And I'm pretty sure I can apply a shake to this. We'll find out. So if I go ahead and apply, if I apply a shake now to that grade layer, you can see the camera just kind of jumps around a little bit. It's going to make it a lot more violent here in a moment. But this is the reason why I render these animations as being bigger than HD resolution, because what's going to happen is it's going to shake the scene back and forth a little bit, and this extra resolution gives Hitfilm some padding to move in and out of the camera view. If that wasn't there, what it tends to do, it does this reflection thing, which you probably won't notice unless you're looking really close. And when I look over video like 100 times because I'm doing video editing, I notice it and it drives me crazy. All right. So what I can do now is animate the amount of shaking. So we'll start at a normal level here. Let's get up to right to about where it starts to go nova. So right there it's starting to go nova. So we'll make it animate up to like 60, so it gets kind of intense there. And now once it goes to nova, which is right there, let's jump to like 150. So it's just getting violent when the weapons fire. And then we can make them kind of calm back down here. This guy's further in the distance as it's charging up, so we'll only make it drop down to about 50 there. And then now, well, let's actually make it drop down to like 40. And then this guy, oh, it's starting to go nova, so let's have it go up to like 50 because it's further away. And then its weapons go totally nova right there. We'll make it about 120 because it's further away. And then they fire and they're going to calm back down pretty much back to basically no shake. And then we'll just kind of finish out the last bit of the scene with, yeah, we'll have a little bit of a shake going on because, you know, epic, right? All right, so you can't really see really a whole lot if I run through the animation right now. But I can render this thing out and the shaking will be a lot more interesting, a lot more noticeable. But with that, that's going to pretty much conclude this little tutorial here for how I create some of these weapon effects for Legends of Kalidasia using Blender and Hitfilm. What I think I might do, just to make these look a little bit cooler, I'm going to render out the weapons separately from everything else. So the actual bolts here as well as the magnetic field dispersion particles, because, you know, that makes sciencey sense. And I can apply those as an additive layer to make them really glow even more inside Hitfilm. That's why you'll probably see the final animation, the weapons look a little bit brighter. But that is about it. So let's take a look at the final animation and see how this thing all turned out. Oh, and by the way, add some epic music in the background as well, because, you know, once again, epic actionness. Well, that's it. Thanks for watching this Hitfilm tutorial. Like I said earlier, if you like these kind of videos, hit that like button, share them with others, and of course subscribe for some of the upcoming projects I've got working on. I got some things being planned over here for Battletech, so we'll be getting back to talking about the new Battletech, a game of armored combat. And of course, I've got parts for Microflash Gamma sitting right, oh, he's Delta now, isn't he? Microflash Delta sitting right in front of me. And I've got a few other things I'm sketching out in my head. I'm going to be working on some longer scenes behind the scenes and probably dump those out to the channel a little bit later this year. So once again, I'm Jason, the creator of the Tabletop Battlefield and the Kalidasia universe. You can find links to both of those in the show notes of this video. So thank you guys all for watching and have a great week.